Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, everybody, depending on what parts of the world you are tuning in today. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Professor William Boone is our guest today. He's going to talk about Rasch measurement. Rasch measurement refers to a family of probabilistic models that are extensively used in different fields, such as language assessment, educational measurement, medical fields, psychology, etc. I would like to introduce Professor William Boone just briefly before I pass the time to him. Professor William Boone earned his Ph.D. from the University of Chicago's program in measurement, evaluation, and statistical analysis, the Department of Education. He is the author of 2 Rasch books for beginners. One is the Rasch Analysis in the Human Sciences, which has become one of the most influential textbooks in Rasch measurement, according to a scientometric analysis we carried out last year, and which was published in the Frontiers in Psychology. And the other book is Advances in Rasch Analysis in the Human Sciences. Both of these books have been published by Springer Publishers. Dr. Boone has published more than 100 peer-reviewed articles. He also presents Rasch workshops for beginning, intermediate, and advanced levels throughout the world. Bill is a professor at Miami University currently. The topic he's presenting on today is entitled User-Friendly Rasch Measurement for Designing and Using Tests and Surveys. So before I pass the time to Bill, I would like to just remind you of a few housekeeping matters here. I'd like to request all of you to please mute your microphones. And also, if you have questions, and I do encourage you to ask questions, please write them down in the chat box right at the bottom of the Zoom window. If you look down, you will see a chat box. Just post your questions there. I'll take them later, and I will ask Bill all the questions. And I would also like to remind you that this event is being recorded, and the video will be made available for a limited period of time, 30 days, on a public website, most likely our YouTube channel, which will be announced later. So without any further ado, I would like to pass the time to Professor Boone. Thank you very much. Bill, over to you.
Okay, and then first of all, Vahid, thank you very much for inviting me to present. I really respect the work that you're doing in Rasch measurement, and from reading what you're doing, I can tell you're going to make a mark in Singapore and really all over with regard to Rasch measurement. So thank you very much for asking me to present. And then for the attendees, Vahid provides a number of classes where you can learn Rasch, and I encourage you to contact him about enrolling in his classes. So first of all, great to see everybody. I'm not looking at all 75 people, but yes, I'm Dr. Bill Boone, and I've written 2 books about Rasch analysis. And roughly what we're going to do is we're going to do about 30 minutes of PowerPoint slides, and then we're going to do a question and answer. And what I really want to emphasize are a couple things before I get to the slides. Number one, to do Rasch measurement, you do not have to be incredible at mathematics or physics or anything like that. There are individuals throughout the world in many, many fields that are using Rasch measurement. You do not have to be a math whiz to use Rasch measurement. If you're a math whiz, you can certainly use Rasch measurement, and that's great. But I really want to encourage all of you that are attending, you can learn basic Rasch, and you can conduct a Rasch analysis, and you can make fundamental contributions to the fields in which you work, be it medicine, social work, education, whatever it would be. So just bear in mind that you as beginners can learn Rasch, you can do Rasch, and you can get articles published as the result of your Rasch analysis. The presentation that I've put together for our talk today is just an intro to Rasch. And certainly if any of you have questions, you can always email me questions and I'm glad to help you. So we'll just start so that we don't run out of time. So let me go to my share screen. And all right. So user-friendly Rasch measurement, and then you can see my email address is down there, boonewjd@gmail.com. These are the two books that I've written for Springer. They are really the first introductory books for Rasch. Each chapter starts off with a conversation between two students. Each chapter ends with a conversation between two students. In each chapter, I take a particular topic in Rasch, and I help you learn step by step how to do that particular type of Rasch analysis. In the chapters, I also provide a sample write-up, which would give you an idea about how you could write the analysis up for an article. I have activities where you can practice. So it's a very, very user-friendly set of books. And it's important to know that the things that I talk about tonight, we're not going to be covering everything in the book. And then the book's available through an e-copy or paper copy. And the second book just came out. All right. Just a couple of things here. I'm just going to move my screen. Okay. All right. Is it difficult to learn Rasch? No, you don't need to be a math expert to learn Rasch and to use Rasch. Does it take long to learn to run Rasch analysis? No. In one day, you could learn how to run a Rasch analysis and how to interpret and use the output, and you can read my books. So the key thing is, it is not difficult to learn Rasch. Now, someone might say, oh, you have to learn all these other things. Well, you can learn all these other things in Rasch, but I can tell you from looking at the articles that come out, if you're working in education or medicine or language or science education or math education, whatever it would be, you can run a very nice analysis in a day, you can write it up, and you can have a great article. All right, so a lot of people ask me, when should I use Rasch? So if any of you are collecting data with a survey or questionnaire, where you have a set of items, maybe 10 items on a survey, 10 items on a questionnaire, most likely you should be using Rasch. If you're going to be designing a new survey or designing a new questionnaire, Rasch theory, Rasch thinking, and Rasch analysis will help you greatly. If you're going to be evaluating a survey or questionnaire data, maybe it's data that you haven't collected, maybe a friend or a colleague or a professor has a set of data that they want analyzed, more than likely you should use Rasch analysis. So if you think about some surveys, a common survey might be strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. You would want to use Rasch. If you have a rating scale where people are asked to just indicate yes or no, you would want to probably use Rasch. If you have a rating scale that's maybe, let me go back up, sorry. If you have a rating scale that's a scale of very important, important, unimportant, very important, you would also want to use Rasch. So those are just some examples of different rating scales. So rating scale data, use Rasch. Okay, maybe you're collecting data with a test that's already been designed. More than likely, you'll want to use Rasch. If you're designing a new test, you want to use Rasch theory to help you design this new test. And the Rasch theory is very, very interesting, and it's very easy to master. If you're evaluating test data, it could be a multiple choice test. So in the United States, we have lots of multiple choice tests where people can answer A, B, C, or D. You would most likely use Rasch. Also, there are tests called partial credit tests. So this would be a case where you have a test question, let's say in physics, that you give students, and the students can earn between 0 and 5 points on an item. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points, you would want to use Rash. Maybe you have an essay exam, maybe you're teaching French or German or English or Chinese, and students answer a question and they write a couple of paragraphs, and the students get points for their answers. More than likely, you're going to want to use Rash. Okay. Why do you want to maybe use Rash? I think most of you will have heard about the concepts of reliability and validity. And if you haven't, don't worry, don't panic. But usually when you read an article in the social sciences about reliability, people will report a Cronbach alpha or a KR20. And they'll say, oh, our test had high reliability or our test had low reliability. I think what I want to mention to all of you that are out there on this presentation, that in Rash, we have many different types of reliability that we look at. So I really want to stress looking at Cronbach alpha or looking at KR20 is helpful, but it's only one small piece of reliability to look at. So I want you to know that you can really do a much better job of looking at the reliability of instruments through using Rash. Also, validity. Most of you will have heard of terms such as content validity and construct validity and concurrent validity, predictive validity. There are many, many types of validity. Rash provides techniques that allow you to do a very impressive job of looking at validity. This allows you to improve your instruments that you develop, and it also allows you to impress reviewers when you are writing an article and you want to get the article accepted. The types of things that you can report in terms of validity through a Rasch analysis are far beyond what people were doing in the past. And then a third thing is you can look at what's called the measurement functioning of surveys and tests. So what do I mean by the measurement functioning of a survey or test? If you have a rating scale, everyone, that might be strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. There are many, many techniques that we use in Rash to decide whether or not the rating scale you have selected for your survey is doing a good job. It could be that it is actually better for you to combine strongly agree and agree together and disagree and strongly disagree together. It could be that if you have neutral as the middle category, that it's actually better to throw neutral out. So there are many, many techniques that we use in Rash that allow you to evaluate how well your survey or test is functioning. And these sorts of things, the reliability information, the validity information, the measurement functioning, you will get this from the Rash software. Now, if some of you have done Rash, you might use a different program. The program I really recommend that you use is called WinSteps. It's very inexpensive. It's only about $150. It's very, very well documented. The colleague of mine, Mike Lineker, who wrote the program, I feel is one of the top Rash people in the world. And he's been writing and improving this program for over 20 years. Also, if you send him a question, you'll get an answer in maybe 24 hours. And then there are now thousands and thousands of articles that have used WinSteps, Rash software to analyze data. My book uses that software. So when I talk you through the steps, some of you might have tried some other software, and that's totally fine. It's important to use Rash, but I would just encourage you to explore WinSteps. It's my choice. Many of my colleagues throughout Europe use WinSteps, and it's because it's so well documented. Down here, I just mentioned, if you use Rash, it's really going to be easier for you to get your grants funded, your articles published, and your dissertation written, because you'll be doing a very, very good job of analyzing your data. Okay. And usually everybody under a normal circumstance, if I was meeting with you in Singapore, we would be having back and forth questioning, but just because of the number of people, that's why I'm just chatting for a while, uninterrupted, and then we'll go to the chat function and I'll answer some questions. Okay, Rasch provides you with what are called person measures, and these are going to be used for your statistical tests. And one of the things that's important for you guys to know is that when you use Rasch analysis, all your data for the persons and the items comes out on a linear scale. A linear scale is like a meter stick. And a linear scale is a requirement for using parametric tests, such as t-tests and ANOVAs. So it's going to be a shock to you, but if you have survey data and test data, and if you immediately do a t-test or an ANOVA, you are perhaps getting incorrect statistical results because test data and survey data is nonlinear. I know I'm going kind of fast, and later on I can talk about this some more, but there'll be the recording and then you guys can listen to this again. So what I want to emphasize is Rasch data is on a linear scale. That allows you to use t-tests and ANOVA. If you immediately do raw data and a t-test or ANOVA, you're violating the requirements of t-tests and ANOVA, and you actually can get the wrong results. All right. Let me go down. All right, so I'm just going to do some examples for you to help you understand why Rasch. So usually if Bill takes a test, that's me, and I get 15 items right, typically we would say Bill got a 10, and that's what we would do our statistics on. But the problem with this is that by saying Bill got a 10 out of 15, it ignores that different test items have different difficulty. So if John gets item 10 right, a very hard item correct, he gets 1 point. And if Dave gets item 7 right of a test and it's a very easy item, he gets 1 item correct, he gets a point. But the 1 point of Dave and the 1 point of John really don't have the same meaning. So Rasch does not assume all test items have the same difficulty. So everybody out there, one of the key things, maybe jot this down in your notes. This is a key thing. Rasch does not assume that all items have the same difficulty. And that's one of the reasons why Rasch is so important and useful. Okay, so when you use Rasch to analyze a test score, for example, many of you will be familiar with TIMS, Trends in International Math and Science Study Test. What they will do is they will compute that John got a 37 out of 40, and then they will compute it to a measure. And they'll do either Rasch or something very similar to Rasch. So they do not use the 37. They will compute a score on a Rasch scale. Okay, so here's an example of Bill taking a test. I got the first item wrong. I got items 2 and 3 correct. Item 4 wrong, item 5 wrong, item 6 right, item 7 right. So Bill has a raw score, and then we compute a Rasch measure using WinStep software, and we get a value for Bill. And this is the number that you're going to be using for your t-tests and your parametric tests, your ANOVAs. Okay, let me explain why you want to use Rasch for a survey. So here's a rating scale survey. Strongly agree, agree, disagree, strongly disagree. A very, very common rating scale survey. And commonly people will code this 4, 3, 2, 1. Totally fine to code it that way for an Excel sheet. Totally fine. The problem is, everyone, all we know is that, and then listen to my words here, all we know is that disagree means more agreement than strongly disagree. All we know is that agree means more agreement then disagree, but we don't know how much. And all we know is that strongly agree means more agreement than agree. But we don't know what the jumps are. Look at the screen right here, and I'm calling these the jumps. The distance between strongly disagree and disagree, I'll call that a jump. I'll call this a jump, and I'll call this a jump. So when you code, everybody look at the PowerPoint here. When you code your data 1, 2, 3, 4, that's totally fine. And if you immediately start doing your mathematics on these numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, you are then making a huge leap of faith that the distance between a strongly disagree to disagree and the jump, the distance from disagree to agree and agree to strongly agree is all the same, but it's not. All we know is that a 2 means more agreement than a 1. All we know is that a 3 means more agreement than a 2. And all we know is that a 4 means more agreement than a 3. So this is another reason why it's important to use Rash. Here would be a survey sheet where you enter Bill's answers to a survey. So this is maybe a survey that has to do with your confidence in teaching. And there were 6 questions on confidence in teaching. And maybe Bill answered a 4, 4, 2, 3, 1, 4. And you put that in an Excel sheet. That's totally fine to put the data in that way. And if you add those numbers up, 4 plus 4 plus 2, that's 10, plus 3 plus 1 plus 4, that's 18. But you cannot do, everybody look at this sheet right here, you cannot do your statistics on this 18. You need to run your Rasch analysis, and I and Vahed can help you learn how to do this. You want to run your Rasch analysis and compute what's called a Rasch person measure, and these are the measures that you're going to use for your analysis. Okay, I'm just keeping my eye on the clock. You cannot say Bill is an 18 because the rating scales are not linear. Okay, you cannot say Bill is an 18. And another reason why you can't say this is a 4 for item 6 doesn't have the same meaning as a 4 for question 1. So a 4, my answer for a 4 here doesn't necessarily have the meaning as the same for a 4 here. Rasch takes into consideration that differing items in a survey are different levels of how easy they are to agree with. So just as I said, Rasch takes into consideration, everyone, different test items have different difficulty. Rasch takes into consideration that different surveys are not equally agreeable. So I'll just repeat that, everybody. Rasch takes into consideration that different survey items are not all equally agreeable. So Rasch knows that Bill's 4 for question 1 may not have the same meaning as Bill's 4 for question 2. Okay. Just a couple other things as I do this whirlwind intro to Rasch for all of you. Another wonderful reason for using Rasch is something called the right map. The right map is named after my PhD advisor, Ben Wright, who pioneered Rasch measurement with Georg Rasch. A right map allows you to look at how good a test or survey is doing with measuring. It helps you identify where a test is not doing a good job of measuring, and it helps you describe the meaning of the measurement. It also tells you, it allows you to describe when you get a student's test score, it allows you to describe how good the student is doing on the test. I'm going to show you an example here. I'm just giving you tons of words here, but let's go to an example. Here is a right map for you, this famous right map, everybody. And just look at the right map. The items are on the right side. Everybody look at the right map. The items at the bottom are the easy items on a test. The items at the top are the hard items on the test. Easiest item down here, So item 12 is the easiest item on the test. Item 20 is the hardest item on the test. So you can read up this line of items, and this is like reading a thermometer. Okay. What we're going to do is let's just only look at this right now. By creating the right map, you can see, does everybody see this blank area right here? This is telling you that if you were creating a good test, you need some more easy items. Just think of this, everybody, as a meter stick. This item is marking the meter stick at the low end of the meter stick. This item is marking the meter stick at a slightly higher end. But then we have a real big gap in items on our meter stick. We also have a gap of items here, a gap of items here, a gap of items here. So if you were designing a new test, you could create this right map and you could immediately see where you would need to improve your test. The other thing that's amazing, everybody, look over here where item 14, 32, and 33 are. Does everybody see that? These tell you that these three items all have the same difficulty. That tells you that these items are actually marking the same part of your meter stick. You are actually wasting 2 items. It would be better to revise your test, remove these 2 items, and try to write some items to fill the gap. Do you see this item, 18 and 17? It would be better to remove one of these items and try to fill this gap. It would be better to remove this item and fill the gap. So the right map allows you to immediately start to improve your test. These are your people. The lowest performing people are on the bottom. The highest performing people are on the top. Each X is a person. So everybody, lowest performing people on the bottom, highest performing people on the top. What I want you guys to do is just look at this. With Rash, we can draw a horizontal line from a group of people. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. We can draw a horizontal line and we can say these people would typically get these items correct, and these people would typically miss these items. So I'm just going to repeat this, everybody, because it's so important. With our right map, we can find any person we want, but here we'll take these people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people. They all have the same Rasch measure. That means they all did the same. They did the same amount on the test, but what's incredible is instead of just saying that somebody got a score of 7 out of 15 on a test, now we can describe what the meaning is of their performance. So if you don't mind, just jot this down in your notes. The right map allows you to describe the meaning of a student's test performance. By knowing where they are on the right map, you can then say what items they typically would get right and typically get wrong. So in medicine, they're using right maps to explain where a patient is. In TIMSS and PISA tests, they're using right maps to explain where people are. So that's a very important aspect of Rasch analysis. Okay. Again, if you use Rasch, I encourage you to use WinStep software. And again, very inexpensive, very, very, very well documented. My book uses this software and talks you through it. And I would say really the top person in Rasch wrote the software, and he's an incredible person. So you guys can always email me. You can always contact me. And then I know we're going to now go to questions that Vahid is going to help communicate to me. So anyway, great to work with you, and I hope that you found the talk so far interesting, and you can always email me. Okay, so let's go. I'm going to hit stop sharing. There we go.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bill. It was a very wonderful presentation. I enjoyed listening to you. I should say I'm very delighted that you started off by answering one of the most frequently asked questions in the field of Rash, and that's, is it difficult to learn? And you actually, you said that it's not difficult to learn. That's really good news for a lot of people who are in this presentation today and have never done Rasch Analysis and are asking whether they can learn it fast. So just the expert just answered the question. No, it's not difficult to learn. So as you were presenting, a few questions came in. So I would like to read some of them, actually all of them to you. Okay. And I've also written down a few other questions in addition to what the attendees have asked. If we find time, I'll also ask them. So the first one is by Gavin Brooks. I think it has already been answered, but I would also like to ask you this question. Maybe you can also add another answer to this. So it's about wind steps. And the question reads, as it's not native on a Mac, is there other software that you could recommend? Do the R packages for Rash work give the same types of measures?
Yeah. So first of all, I can tell you what I have had students in my class do that have Macs is you can get your Mac to pretend it's a PC. Then you can run WinSteps. So many of my students that have Macs, they simply are able to go to their IT person and have their Mac pretend it's a PC. So that would be the first thing that I would say. And in terms of the R packages, what I would say is, certainly I know there are a variety of R packages out there. I'm certainly biased about this. I really trust the coding by Mike Lineker because he's done the coding for Rash for 30 years. I realize that R packages are free and they're kind of popular to use, but I would say they're not as well documented as they need to be. People keep jumping in and changing the code. Sometimes I think that it might not be clear who you would contact. So just in a general way, I would say just be careful about the R packages that you use. For WinSteps, you can get WinSteps, you can get your Macs to pretend that they're a PC, and that honestly, that's what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you very much. Great. So the second question comes from Hike Newman, and he's asking, what's the difference between the program facets and WinSteps? Does one have an advantage over the other one?
Yeah.
And of course, some answers were provided, but I would also like to hear your idea about
yeah. This. So first of all, everybody, Hike, thanks for that question. So there are two very significant programs that Mike Lineker's written. This program that's called Facets and WinSteps. WinSteps does an analysis of test data. It does an analysis of survey data. It does an analysis of partial credit data. If you're using, for example, that uses judges, so I'll give everybody an example from the Olympics. I think all of you know that if you would observe figure skating in the Olympics, you have contestants who are the figure skaters, and the contestants are doing a number of different moves in figure skating, and then those contestants are being evaluated by judges. So for a test, a multiple choice test or a survey, you have people that take a test that are answering items, or you have people that are taking a survey that are answering survey items. Facets looks at people, and in my example, items, and then also in terms of judges. So you can think of facets as looking at more complicated data that can be analyzed using Rash. So in a broad stroke, I would say that would be the best example. And I am definitely not trying to plug my book, but in the first book that I wrote, I have a chapter that will introduce you to facets and help you understand the ins and outs of it. So that would be the big difference.
Thank you very much, Bill. Yeah, I mean, facets has been used quite extensively in the field I investigate. That's language assessment. Both facets and WinSteps are quite popular in the field of language assessment. So the next question here that has been asked by Gavin Brooks again, I'm just going in a chronological order.
Sure.
Would the person ability group between items 8, 7, and 18, I think it refers to the right map that you were presenting, be caused by a lack of questions to measure students at that ability level? I think he's referring to the gap. The students seemed very bunched together at that point.
Yeah. So let me just answer in a broad way, and then Gavin, by all means, you can always email me with further questions. So everybody, you remember the right map. Just look at me right here. We got the right map. And I don't know, I don't know which way I appear on your screen, but we've got the items here, easy items to hard items, and then we've got low performing people to high performing people. If you have a gap on your right map where the items are, that will lower the precision of your measurement instrument. That will lower the way in which you can distinguish the performance of the test takers. So if you have a gap in the items on your measurement instrument, that will mean that it's harder for you to distinguish where people are, in particular, where that gap is. So absolutely, if you have some gaps in your items, it will mean that you get more measurement error. In Rash, we talk about measurement error, and that's another topic we could talk for an hour about. In Rash, we realize that everything has measurement error. So if you want to impress your research advisor or your dean or a journal reviewer about your understanding of measurement, in Rash, we realize everything has measurement error. Okay. Did that help?
Wonderful. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So the next question comes from Azrifa. And she asks for a survey with a mix of positive, neutral, and negative statements. Do we have to account for the type of question before running the analysis?
Great question. Okay. In my book, I talk about this. If we have a survey that says, I love pizza, I do not love apples, I love hamburgers, that middle item would be an item that we would call a negatively worded item. So I love pizza, I do not like apples, I love hamburgers. Before we do our Rasch analysis, we have to do what I call flipping or reverse coding. And what that would mean would be if the rating scale, everybody, was 1, 2, 3, 4, and if 1, 2, 3, 4 is the scale that we use for I love pizza and I love hamburgers, we would then have to recode the one that about I do not love apples. We would have to recode a 4 as a 1, a 3 as a 2 as a 3, and a 1 as a 4. You could either do the recoding in an Excel spreadsheet, but also WinSteps allows you to do the recoding before you do your analysis.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a great question.
Yeah. So another question is by Ruslan. Russ is asking, how is the difficulty level of each item calculated in Rasch analysis? What are the underlying assumptions and principles? I know it's different from CTT, classical test theory, where the item difficulty level is dependent on the test takers who answer that item. How about Rasch?
Okay, all right. I'll give you the 30-second or 1-minute answer. And then if you email me, I have a recent article where I explain sort of some of the mathematical details. I guess what's important for you to know is that Georg Rasch, this Danish mathematician who visited the University of Chicago, and that's how Ben Wright met him, he came up with what's called a probabilistic model. So it's a model that's based on probabilities. And that model starts with the answers that I give to every item, whether or not I got the item right or wrong. And then that raw data that is computed from my scores, basically we use that Rasch model to ultimately get to an item difficulty and a person ability. There's a very beautiful spreadsheet that one of the students at the University of Chicago put together. And what I'll do is I will forward it to Vahid, and then you could contact him for that. It's a spreadsheet that includes data in an Excel spreadsheet, and it shows you through the steps in which the Rasch model works. Or you can email me for this as well.
Yeah, wonderful. I'll be happy to circulate that spreadsheet. And I'm sure it will be very useful, especially for anyone who is interested to learn what is going on behind the screen when we run a Rasch analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. Under the hood.
Yeah, under the hood. So another question is coming from Liz Coase. You have already touched on that, but I think it would be nice that I read it again. Thank you for this very clear explanation. Do you cover multifaceted Rasch measurement in your introductory book? And do you talk about analyzing rater performance as well as student performance on tests?
So in the two books that were published from Springer, there's a chapter where I do an introduction to multifaceted Rasch, which is the facets. So in the first book, I have a chapter on that. And then I have an article that I wrote, which was an introduction to facets. You could contact me for that one. Honestly, there's so much, I guess, that one can learn about a basic Rasch analysis. My hope is maybe someday to write a Rasch book about facets, and maybe that'll be the next one I do. So one chapter in the first book, and then they could contact me about this other article I wrote.
Nice. I look forward to your next book, Bill. So another question coming from William Bayliss asking, sorry for the technical question. What's the connection between fair averages and separation? I think that's about facets.
You know what I would say on that one? I would have to think through what the answer is. So email it to me and then I'll try to research it.
Good. Jan is asking, when running a two-facet analysis, is there any advantage to using win steps instead of facets?
Yeah. What I would say is, my guess is that Mike Lineker probably, you would have to check with Mike Lineker. The question would be, so a two-faceted analysis would be a rating scale analysis or a test analysis of the type you do in win steps. And I think the question would be, does facets provide all the analyses and all the bells and whistles that win steps does? And I don't know. My gut feeling would be it probably doesn't, because facets was written for this more complicated set of data. That would be my gut feeling. Also, I would say, don't be scared when I tell you how thick the manual is. But the manual for win steps that Lineker has put together might be, isn't it like 300 pages or something incredible like that? So Mike Lineker keeps detailing everything in win steps. So I just don't know if the facets manual would be in as much detail.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the next question is coming from Thwin Mint, And he's asking, I'm planning to use Rasch Analysis in my research. I have two variables, writing performance and lexical diversity scores. As I am pretty new to Rasch Analysis, I'm not clear yet which method I should use. I would appreciate your suggestion.
Okay, so it was, but what was it? Does he have two separate measures?
So he has two variables, writing performance and lexical diversity. I suppose two separate measures, yes.
Okay, so I can see Twin nodding there, so hi, Twin. So basically, if I understand your question correctly, you have two, really, it would be as if you had a physics test that were given to people, and then maybe a math test that were given to people. So what you would do is you would do a Rasch analysis on the one measure, and then you would do a Rasch analysis on the other measure, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Yeah, I think that's probably what Twin has meant.
Yeah, and so Twin, what you would do is you would do a thorough Rasch analysis on the one set of data, looking at how everybody, this would be true for everybody. You would take that data, even if it was an existing instrument, you would evaluate how well that instrument was working. You would maybe make some fine-tuning adjustments even on an existing instrument. Then ultimately you would get your person measures. Then you would do your analysis for the other instrument. You would look at how it's working. Then you would get your person measures. Then you would take the two person measures, and then you would do your statistical tests, your regressions, your correlations, your t-tests, and your ANOVAs. And of course, you would try not to forget about the right map.
Okay, wonderful. Bill, there's a question. If you don't mind, I answer this because it's about NIE, the National Institute of Education. That's where I'm working. Rebecca Chan is asking, Rash is totally new to me. Will NIE be providing any training? Actually, in the past, we have had maybe a couple of workshops or more on Rash measurement. If you want to have more information about that, Rebecca, please get in touch with me. I'll be happy to help you with that. And I'm also hoping that Bill will be available in the future to do some online workshops. Hopefully after the pandemic, some physical workshops as well here in Singapore.
Yeah, even visit, that'd be great.
Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so Kale Chu is asking, do you think it's feasible for schools to use Rash to analyze their school tests and exams? This is a great question, and I'm sure a lot of people would have this question in mind.
Yeah, one of the Rash classes that I teach has teachers in it, and they ask me this all the time.
Yeah.
The first thing that I would say that Rash right maps are being used to explain the performance of students to parents. Right maps are being used to explain the student performance to parents. So if you guys would like to see a sample right map that's used by my state, the state of Ohio, to communicate student performance to parents, send me an email and I'll send you the brochure that's used by the state of Ohio. So the first thing that I would say is, I feel that right maps are a very good way of explaining complicated data to parents in a very simple way. Second thing would be, I would say in schools, if there are some very, very important tests that are created by the schools to decide which students get into which schools or which students get into which classes, then that would be another example of why Rash would be so critical. And I also have had teachers do Rash analyses. There's something that Vahid can explain to you through his classes. If you take his classes, there are statistics called fit statistics in Rash, and they allow you to identify strange behavior on the part of students. So one thing that might be very important for a school or a teacher is to be able to identify which students of yours are unexpectedly getting very hard items correct, which students of yours that are really good are unexpectedly missing some easy items, that would be something that would be very important for a teacher to know. So I could talk for an hour about this, but in a nutshell, that would be a couple thoughts.
Great, thank you. Just to add on to what Bill said about our classes at the National Institute of Education, as you know, in Singapore, they have the government has implemented a program called SFED, which stands for Skills Future, I think, in Education, something like that. So, which means that there are certain courses that are made available to the public. So everyone who has an interest to take, for example, our language assessment course, which will start from next semester, in which we will cover Rasch Analysis, is very welcome to write to me. I'll be happy to provide more information whenever I receive your emails. The next question is coming from Terence Chia, who's asking, hi, would Rash be able to incorporate time for longitudinal data? The same survey is implemented across time. For example, in a longitudinal study with 7 time points, how can Rash be used? Would it only be possible when Rash analysis is run separately for each time point, or is there any way to incorporate time?
Okay, so this is more of a complicated question. First of all, you would, just to start off, you would want to use Rash for that data. So if you collected data on a survey at 7 time points from, and also I want to mention, everybody, you can do a very good Rash analysis with a sample size of 30. So there's a misconception that just because Rash is used for TIMSS and PISA, very huge tests, I want you all to be aware you can run Rash on small sample sizes. You have to be aware of what the ramifications are of that, but I really want to emphasize that. And then the type of data that you're describing, a survey given at 7 time points, you would run a Rash analysis, and there would be a variety of ways of approaching this. My mentor, Ben Wright, talked about something called stacking data and something called racking data. Fahad, have you read any of Ben's little Rash Sig article on that at all?
I think I have not really come across how to do racking, but I've learned a little bit about stacking.
Stacking, yeah. So what I want you to know, everybody, is you could definitely look at that data. And then just remember, if you had data collected at 7 time points with one survey, you're then going to get 7 measures for each person. And then remember, then you're just going to use all your statistical tools in your arsenal to try to figure out what the patterns are in the data.
Wonderful. Thanks. Another question is coming from Gavin Brooks, and he's asking, if you are giving a standardized test to a small group of students, and the test has been validated with a larger cohort of learners, which you do not have access to, are there any factors that need to be taken into account when conducting a Rash analysis on the data from that smaller cohort of learners?
I guess what I would say is, so it sounds like you're saying my state of Ohio has a test. They do a Rash analysis. They say, oh, the test is wonderful. Then I take the test and I give the test to 50 people.
Right.
So one of the things that you would have to remember is when you do your Rash analysis, and it's going to be a little technical, so folks that are just learning Rash for the first time, don't worry. Basically, the item difficulties that you calculate from your Rash analysis of the 50 people may be different in some ways from the item difficulty calculated from the 1,000 people. And then there's some analyses that we do to see how different they are. And one thing that we do is called diff. It's called differential item functioning. And I have a chapter in my first book about this thing called diff. So yes, there are some things that you would want to think about. It could be, if they didn't use Rash to develop this new test, it could be that you discover something new about the test that they had never seen through the old analysis.
Great. Thanks. Our next question is coming from Eddie Chong, and he's asking, sorry, sounds like RightMap can be a great tool to facilitate provision of formative feedback to students on assignments and tests. Am I right?
Absolutely, 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 absolutely. That's why people are attempting to use right maps to communicate student performance to parents and to students and to teachers. And that's why in medicine, they're trying to use right maps to communicate where a patient is. So if they had a stroke and they're recovering, they show where the person is on the right map, and they say in your stroke recovery, our hope would be that you could do these things, and then our hope would be the next thing that you can do is maybe walk up the stairs and then maybe run up the stairs. So absolutely.
Nice. So KL Chui has followed up with a question asking, thank you, does the school you mentioned also do vertical test equating for students using Rash?
I'll just do an example. I can't remember the school that I mentioned, but for example, my colleagues in Germany that do research in physics education, they do something that's called vertical test equating. And for the people that are just learning Rash for the first time, what I want you guys to know is you could develop a test. Just look at my hands here on the screen. You could develop a test for students that are 10 years old, and you could give them that test. The next year, you could develop a test for when they're 11. And the next year, you could develop a test for when they're 12. By using Rasch methods, if you have some common items, let's say there are 5 items that are common on the test for 10-year-olds to the test with 11-year-olds. And then if you have 5 items that are common for the tests that were 12 and 11, you can put everything on the same scale, and it allows you to evaluate the growth of students. Before Rasch, everybody, no one could do this. So you can develop a unique test targeted to the learning ability of students at one age. The next year, you can develop a harder test. The next year, you can develop a harder test. But you can link these through, it's called item anchoring, and you can put everything on the same scale. So I guess what I would say is my colleagues in Germany will do that in schools for some of their research that they do.
Okay, wonderful. Bill, it's almost 9:30. I was wondering if we could, because there's 1 or 2 more questions, I was wondering if you could answer the questions before we call it a day today.
Absolutely.
I know it's late evening. I really appreciate that you have taken time out of your evening.
Absolutely, absolutely. And before I forget, somebody I'd seen sent a note in the chat box. My email is boonewjd, so boonewjd@gmail.com.
Okay, wonderful. Actually, I'm gonna type it in the chat box. Just.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, so here you go, everyone. That's Bill's email. Feel free to write to him. And there's another question here, which just came in, and which is asked by Si Hui from the Ministry of Education of Singapore. I assume that's Singapore. Can Rash be used for pre-testing a perception survey? If so, how does this work?
Absolutely. And when I hear the word survey, if you're giving, I call it an instrument, a survey, a questionnaire, if you're giving a set of items that involve one topic, so let's say you're giving 10 items that involve your views towards learning science, or if you're giving 15 items involving confidence, or if you're giving 12 items regarding your views towards a curriculum, you would use Rash. So I'm guessing that that's what you would do. That's what you're hoping to do. And then absolutely, absolutely, if you were designing a survey that you would want to give, you would use Rash. You would use Rash to help you design it. You would use Rash you would collect pilot data and you would analyze the right map to see where you're missing items, where you have enough items. And then ultimately you would use Rash to calculate these person measures. So absolutely, absolutely, from the get-go, you would want to use Rash. In my first book and in the second book, I have a number of chapters that actually presents a number of steps that you could follow.
Great. Thank you very much, Bill. I also have a question. It's one of the most frequently asked questions that people would like to know about, and that's the differences between IRT, that's item response theory, and Rash measurement. Are they the same, or are they different?
Yeah, so let me give a quick explanation. And then in that first book that I wrote, I have a chapter on the differences. So some people view Rash as part of a family of IRT models. So some people say, here's item response theory, and Rash is one type of IRT model. Other people say that Rash is quite different than IRT. Without getting too technical, before I was a psychometrician, I was a geophysicist. I was a seismologist. I studied earthquakes. And from my perspective as a geophysicist, the Rash model makes more sense. With the Rash model, when we're looking at a test, we look at just item difficulty and personability, and we don't add any other factors. And we say that the Rash model is a definition of what it means to measure. And if our data doesn't fit the Rash model, it means that there's maybe something wrong with our survey or our test. And then we just try to investigate it. So that's quite different. In IRT, they alter the model to fit the data. So in Rash, my perspective is the Rash model is a definition of what it means to measure. And we then see if our data fit the Rash model. In IRT, we tweak the model to fit our data. I feel that when you get your data to work with the Rash model, you are doing a much more rigorous analysis. And it's, to me, closer to what scientists did during for example, the Renaissance, when they were developing early measurement instruments. So I have a chapter on that. There's some good articles that I can send you about how Rash differs from IRT. And then I don't get into arguments with people that like IRT, but I think Rash is the superior model.
Great, thank you very much. And I think this is going to be our last question. Are there any prerequisites for Rash analysis? What should the data look like to be suitable for Rash analysis?
Beautiful question, beautiful question. When you do a Rash analysis, you want to make sure that the data you're collecting involves one particular variable. When you collect data, you want to make sure that your data involves one particular variable. So for example, if you have a 30-item math test that was given to students that are 10 years old, and if teachers and principals and superintendents and professors agree that that is reasonable information to be on the test, that it has content validity, and it involves the variable of mathematics, then you do the Rasch analysis. So a requirement of Rasch is that the data you're collecting involves, I'm going to use a couple different words here just to help everyone. You want to make sure it involves one variable. You want it to make sure it involves one trait. You want to make sure it involves one construct. Those all mean the same thing. So that is, to me, the one overarching important requirement for using Rasch. Vahid, would you agree with that? Any things you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, that was a great answer. And I know I said that was the last question, but I think it just brought up another question in my mind, and that's
Absolutely.
so how do you differentiate and what do you think about the unidimensional Rasch measurement and multidimensional conceptualizations of Rasch in which people use more than one variable?
Yeah, I am just being honest. Um, it doesn't make sense to me because to me, Rash is always one variable. And the thing that I'm a little concerned about is I think many of you who are in attendance tonight or this morning know that with factor analysis, sometimes people would throw data into a factor analysis model and let the model dictate what the variables were. And it just seemed with factor analysis, it seems as if maybe the level of thinking about what it means to measure sometimes is missing. And I know that multidimensional Rash is maybe popular. It might be because people are having to do new things to get promoted to be full professors. I don't know, but it actually doesn't. It doesn't make much sense to me because I'm always thinking about just making a measurement on one variable.
Good. Thank you very much, Bill. Great answer. And I think that's the end of the questions. We have gone over time by around 8 minutes. I really appreciate your time, your great presentation. I do certainly look forward to having you again on another occasion whenever you are free. It will be wonderful to again sit down and have a talk like this, a presentation as well. So I think that everybody, that brings us to the end of this webinar today. I would like to thank you very much for attending this and for asking wonderful questions. I'm sure, just like me, also felt that Bill provided great answers to the questions. So what I would like to add here before we call it today is we're going to upload the video with the permission given by Bill, upload the video probably to a YouTube channel, and we'll keep it there for a minimum period of time, probably around 30 days. We will send you the link. So if you're interested, you can go back and watch the presentations and the questions and answers. Bill, do you have anything else to say before we?
Yeah. You might, maybe when you send the link, you might mention your YouTube channel about experts, and you have a number of things on that YouTube channel. You might include that, and
Sure.
they'd be able to see that I talk in more detail about the right map there.
Sure, that's a great point. Yeah, so just to give you an idea about the YouTube channel, there's a section in the YouTube channel we're talking about called Learn with Experts, and Bill had agreed to do a presentation on Rasch Analysis. His video is there. I'll also make sure to send you the link to that video as well as the video that is being recorded right now. So feel free to go through other videos if you're interested to browse through the channel. Thank you very much, everybody, again, for joining us today. Thank you very much, Bill, for taking time out of your evening. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else on this panel appreciates it. So we hope to have you again very soon.
Great. And then everybody, how about a round of applause for Vahid organizing this?
Thank you very much. And for you too.
Okay, everybody, it's great to meet with you. And then just remember, you've got a great resource here in Singapore. Then you can contact me. And just remember, it is not hard to learn Rash.
Great. Thank you very much. And I couldn't agree more.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye. See everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.